Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome all of you to this one-day international conference that IQAC is organizing on proactive governance and policy implementations in the times of COVID-19. I welcome all our esteemed guests and speakers for the day. Our keynote speaker, Professor Vidyut Chakravarti, Vice Chancellor Shanti Niketan, sir. I'm not able to see you though. Professor V.K. Kaul from Delhi University, Professor Kaisa Sorsa from Finland, and Professor Muneem Barai from Japan. Firstly, this is yet another pioneer initiative that we have taken at SLC by organizing this one-day international conference on the virtual mode, which is a first in Delhi University. And since the lockdown was announced in March 2020, we have been continuing with the teaching and learning process. Us through the virtual mode. We have organized a 7-day workshop which the Center for Skill Development organized, and we had almost 250 participants for it. We also organized an online yoga competition which the Center for Holistic Development had organized, along with other various webinars and talks. We have received a huge, overwhelming response for this conference also. We have had over 500 registrations and had to close within 3 days of floating the registration form. The topic of this conference is most pertinent in present times, as proactive governance both at the micro and macro level can ensure effective crisis management as well as return back to normalcy for people, societies, and the world as a whole. These times have made us ponder over how the entire approach to managing human and environmental policy, it needs to be reworked and rethought about, and it also requires a holistic approach where all sections, institutions, stakeholders are equal participants, equal risk holders, as well as equal beneficiaries. With our esteemed keynote speaker and a panelist delving over different aspects of proactive governance and its role in formulating robust as well as people-centric policies, I'm sure that the discussions and deliberations here are going to give us different country perspective as to how there is no single approach to proactive governance, and how there are new emerging capabilities, challenges, as well as processes that leaders across the world and institutions can learn from and benefit from. On this note, I once again welcome all to this international conference, which would not have been possible without the able guidance, leadership, and encouragement of our principal, Professor Ravi Narayan Kar. I would like to take this opportunity to say a few words about Professor Kar. He's a well-known and renowned academic who is widely traveled. He has had numerous publications from publishers like Edward Elgar, Macmillan, and other very renowned publishers like Palgrave, Springer, etc. He has traveled to many countries on academic assignments, and most prominently, he has been associated with Georgia Tech Institute, USA, and CIN Business School in France. Most notably, he has been the visiting professor to Turku University of Applied Sciences, Finland, as well as XAMK, Finland. As a principal, as a leader, he has really turned the college around, with faculty and students getting encouraged to achieve greater academic heights. He is also, last but not the least, he's also the visitors nominee to Shanti Niketan. I heartily welcome you, sir, and request you to give the welcome address to this conference.
Good evening. Namaskar to all of you. Am I audible?
Yeah.
So I take pleasure in welcoming you all to our international conference, Proactive Governance and Policy Implementations in the Times of COVID-19. I extend a very, very warm welcome to our uh, chief guest of the day, who is going to deliver the inaugural address, Professor Vidyut Chakraborty. So I would request sir to kindly come on so that all of us could see you. I know, sir, you have been sitting there since long. So may you kindly please, sir, unmute your video so that you will be visible to the audience. So with this, on behalf of the Shamlal fraternity, I welcome you, sir, for kindly agreeing to our request to deliver the inaugural address. And at the same time, it won't have been possible without your guidance, and a man of having vast knowledge and expertise on public governance and administration, having knowledge on constitutional laws. It would be more appropriate in the fitness of things to deliver the inaugural address. At the same note, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished panelists, starting from Professor Kaija Sosa from Turku University of Applied Sciences, Finland, Professor Monim Kumar Barai from APU, Japan, and Professor V.K. Kaul from Department of Business Economics, University of Delhi. I once again, on behalf of SLC fraternity, welcome you all, and thank you for acceding to our request to address this gathering. With this also, we have very, very distinguished participants, professors from abroad who have joined here. I could see Kejo Varis is also sitting here. Namaste from India. Yeah. So I think Ari has also joined. And I have knowledge that some people from England, they are also joined. And some people from Japan also, they have also joined. And some students also from cutting across different countries, they have also joined. So a very warm welcome to you all from India. With this also, last but not the least, all designated delegates, participants from different corners of India, I extend you very warm welcome to you all. This topic, as the society evolves, there are rising expectations of the public, and accordingly, the governance system should evolve for the betterment of the public. This is like a public good, but its visibility was not there earlier. It deals with the governance system that is continuously engaged and connected with the public for their betterment. And having said so, if we connect with the various schemes and the efforts of the government, like starting, I will start with the Honorable Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat, whether it is Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat, whether it is Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, whether you see the Swachhata Bharat Mission, whether you Ujjala scheme, and lot of many other schemes like Ayushman Bharat, even rescuing people from abroad, even from a Twitter message. These things were unthinkable in earlier times. So this is what are the examples of proactive governance and policy. Now, we had given the knowledge and information of, earlier I was thinking it is around 500 laws, but to my utter surprise, till today we had repealed around 1500 legislations which have become very, very archaic and old and irrelevant, which is a very, very huge figure. 1500 legislations we have repealed because we are focusing on less legislation and more governance. I would draw your kind attention to another recent scenario which has completely turned around the academic teaching learning scenario, where all the teachers, whether it is school teachers, college or university teachers or faculties, all of us proactively engaged with the stakeholders overnight through digital mode, online teaching on learning happening in India itself, and that too without waiting for a government notification and even training. So these are all examples of proactive engagement. This unprecedented affliction resulted by the COVID has given us a lot of impetus for moving towards proactive engagement and policy making. In that sync, here with this august audience, I am just raising three questions which I think may help in getting a lot of answers towards this proactive governance and for public betterment. First, I would like to raise what are the forces of change that are disrupting the contextual environment. Second, what are the new ground level requirements or expectations that need to be integrated into policy making. Third, implementation is very, very important. So, what institutional mechanism is needed for effective implementation of such policies? I won't take much time. With this, once again, I would extend a warm welcome to you all, and I would be failing in my duties if I won't be congratulating our IQAC team led by Dr. Prasad Tiwari and her entire team and the support staff for coming out with very, very innovative programs, actions, and a lot of workshops where proactively we have been engaging throughout, even before COVID times, and that has enhanced during this lockdown period. So with this, once again, thank you all for joining us in our academic journey. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very, very appropriate introduction to the entire theme and for setting the ball rolling. I would request Dr. Ashu to briefly introduce our esteemed speakers for the day.
Good afternoon to one and all. Myself, Dr. Ashu Gupta, member of IQAC and one of the faculty from Chemistry Department. Once again, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all my esteemed speakers and all the participants. Before we start with our today's program, I would like to give a brief introduction of all the distinguished speakers. As we all know that the inaugural address will be given by Professor Vidyut Chakravarti, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Visv Bharati. He is formerly a professor of political science, University of Delhi. Sir has obtained his PhD from the London School of Economics. He has been a prolific writer with many books published by globally reputed publishers. He is an authority in public administration and is widely cited for his originally contribution to Gandhi's social and political thought. Sir has a large number of articles published in referred academic journals with high impact factor. He was also the nominee of President of India for the JNU Executive Council 2015-17. Sir has been the visiting professor in various renowned universities across the globe. Sir, I welcome you. Our next speaker is Professor V.K. Kaul, Senior Professor, Department of Business and Economics, University of Delhi. Sir has completed his PhD in 1991. To his credit, he has various awards and fellowships. Sir has also been member of various empowered expert committees. His research is mainly focused on geoeconomics, geopolitics, public policy, and business, and so on. Sir has supervised many PhD students and has published over 120 research papers. We welcome you, sir. After Professor Vicky Call's session, we will be having a session of Professor Kaisa Souza. Professor Kaisa Souza is Principal Lecturer at the Turku University of Applied Sciences and Adjunct Professor at the University of Joensuu, Department of Law, and Adjunct Professor of Regulatory Research at the University of Turku. Her research interest lately has focused on systematic transition and sustainability. Her viewpoint to research is to combine business and legal knowledge and to study contracting in a real life context. She has published several textbooks and articles in her fields of specialization, specifically in collaboration with Chandler College. Also, she has many projects to her credit. Now, lastly, it will be followed by our distinguished speaker, Professor Muneem Burai. Sir is a professor of finance at the Graduate School of Management, Ritsumeikan, Asia Pacific University, Japan. Presently, he is also the Vice Dean, International Cooperation and Research Division of APU. Dr. Barai completed his Master's, MPhil and PhD from the Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. He is a recipient of number of fellowships. His present research interest includes banks and non-bank financial institutions, regional trade, microfinance, macroeconomics issues, and inclusive finance. He has published many articles in renowned journals. We welcome you all. On behalf of my college, we are grateful to all of you for accepting our invite, and I hope to have a fruitful webinar with you all. Now, I would like to invite Professor Vidyut Chakrabarty for his valuable talk. Over to you, sir. Professor Vidyut Chakrabarty, over to you, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
It's good to be back in an academic exercise, because once you become Vice Chancellor, you are far, far away from the academia. So the moment Ravi invited me to be part of this video conference, I readily accepted, because that will give me a chance to share my views on a particular theme on which I've been working for quite some time. Now, I know there are many students. So initially I was in doubt whether I should speak in English or I should speak in Hindi. But here I find we have got foreign dignitaries, foreign speakers. So I'll stick to English, and I would like to speak in as simple English language as possible, so that my students who are listening to me are benefited. First of all, I compliment Ravi for having chosen this particular topic in this time of dire crisis. But let me talk about the topic per se. The topic is proactive governance, policy implementation in the time of COVID crisis. Now, first of all, I know I am one of those who is still old-fashioned in my thinking. And as a student of public administration, I would like to accept the term governance with not a pinch of salt, but with a bucket full of salt. Because if you know that the idea of governance is something which came out of the practitioners' idea, especially the World Bank. You know that when the sub-Saharan African countries failed to repay the loan given by the IMF and the World Bank came out with a document in 1989, the World Development Report, in which they introduced the term governance in place of public administration. Now, when they talk about governance, they initially insisted on the idea of structure, the idea of process. But in public administration, we have a system called the idea of purpose. So public administration, as you know, is characterized by the structure, the process, and the purpose, that is public. So, when you think of structure, we think of bureaucracy. When you think of the process, we normally tend to draw on Max Weber's contribution to bureaucracy as to how bureaucracy functions to arrive at a particular decision. But when governance comes, governance insists primarily on the idea of structure, that is bureaucracy, the process, But when it comes to the question of purpose, the idea of governance remained silent. So then that particular idea was expanded beyond sub-Saharan Africa in a particular report of the World Bank that was published in 1992. And that particular report, expanded to the globe as a whole. And there we came out of with certain features of governance. And here the basic idea on which the idea of governance is based refers to: one, the multiple actors; the second, the ethical concerns; third, the responsiveness; the fourth is accountability; and the finally is transparency. Now, that means, so far the governance or the public administration in most of the countries remain non-responsive, remain non-accountable, remain non-transparent, remain non-ethical. I mean, here I find there is the element of politics, in the sense that the idea of World Bank always talks about some kind of our relationship in which, though the developed countries remain at the top and the developing countries always remain subservient. So I think with the introduction of the idea of governance, the idea of power structure became very important insofar as the idea of governance is concerned. Now, later on, I find that the governance was redefined, and the governance was explained in such a way as to take care of the concerns of the developing countries. And there I find they added several other features like participation, like rule of law, like transparency, like responsiveness, like consensus building, like equity and inclusiveness, efficiency and accountability. So if you take all of them into account, then now governance to me is very close to public administration. So now I am little comfortable with the use of the term governance. Now then the second point is that even Ravi in his address suggested that is COVID-19 which led us to this kind of video conferencing. So that means what? It's reactive. So I am not very sure whether it is proper to suggest that the governance is has to be proactive. Governance can be reactive as well. I mean, instead, I would like to define the topic of today's discussion as that this governance or the government is proactively reactive, or government is reactively proactive. Because I think the government decides a particular course of action, which we call policy, not in a vacuum. Instead, the government always decides or charts out a particular course of action in response to a particular situation or particular occasion. So I think in today's context, the COVID-19 is such an event which forced the government and also those which are associated with governance in general to devise a particular means, particular ways, particular steps to take care of the situation which appears to be unprecedented. So, the first part of my lecture is about the conceptual difficulty of the idea of governance. But then I came out with the conclusion that in view of the new researches on the idea of administration, the governance is coming very closer to public administration. So the idea of purpose, which was missing in the 1989 document, in the 1992 document, appears to have come back. So when you think of governance, it's not simply bereft of public purpose. It has become integrally connected with public purpose and public design. So this is the first part of my address, and the second part where I'll talk about the historical occasion. Now, when you think of COVID-19, we should not think that this for the first time the globe is confronting a kind of unprecedented event to address. If you look at history, especially with regard to recent history, we'll find that in the early part of the 20th century, the globe was shattered by the outbreak of two severe pandemic, which devastated the world as a whole by killing so many millions of people from all over the world. Now, I have in mind here the 1914 bubonic plague crisis, which affected the globe and also India, and especially the three important metropolitan cities of India at that point of time, Bombay, Calcutta, and partly Pune. And as you know, the Pune was very severely affected. And at that point of time, Bal Gangadhar Tilak criticized the government, what is called very prejudiced mindset vis-a-vis the Indians when it comes to the controlling of the plague. And at that point of time, the plague commissioner happens to be William Rand. And you know that William Rand was assassinated by Chapekar brothers because of his prejudicial decisions vis-a-vis the Indians. So then the plague spread to Bombay, and then it came to Calcutta. Now Calcutta, I'm just doing some research in the context of Calcutta when bubonic plague occurred. The same thing here happened, that the government at that point of time, it's the British government, which really didn't react favorably to the patients who are suffering from bubonic plague, and a lot of people got killed as a result of the outbreak of this kind of epidemic. And at that point, government was very particular about protecting the British people here in Calcutta at the cost of the Indians in Calcutta. And there was a massive protest, and you will be surprised to know Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore took part in the protest, and then he not only questioned the arrest of Bal Gangadhar Tilak simply because he wrote a very critical essay questioning the British design of controlling plague in his journal called Keshori, and Tagore condemned the arrest of Bal Gangadhar Tilak for his protest against the British policy. And he wrote a long essay in a journal called Bharati, and there he raised his own observation that the government was not at all proactive vis-a-vis controlling plague, vis-a-vis controlling this epidemic. As a result, people were suffering like anything. So and after that, I know there are a lot of stories. There are a lot of even newspaper clippings I saw where I found that Tagore was on the road collecting money for those who are affected by plague, just to support them. And at that point of time, that the plague vaccine was discovered, and most of the Indians were reluctant to take this vaccine because they thought that the vaccine was not a cure, but a kind of a medicine to kill them instantaneously. And Tagore again combated that kind of superstitious belief for which Indians were suffering. So, and then Tagore really supported the mission which the local Indians, local people from Calcutta undertook just to take care of these plague victims, and as a result, Calcutta suffered less from this kind of epidemic. So I'm referring to the historical fact just to suggest that this the COVID epidemic is certainly severe, is certainly something which is dangerous, which has really changed our mindset. But this is nothing new in the sense that history has seen this kind of epidemic even in the past. Then again, the same thing had happened a little later after the First World War was over in 1918. That at that point of time, Spanish flu broke out and really caused severe damage to human life throughout the world. And here too, I find that Rabindranath Tagore participated. I'm referring to Rabindranath Tagore's role in this kind of act simply because I belong to a university which was founded by Rabindranath Tagore in 1921. And by 1918, we had the school which was founded by Tagore in 1901. So at that point of time, a lady from Denmark, she came along with Spanish flu, and that affected some of the members of this particular ashram called Vishwabharati, and Tagore was a little worried that what to do. And you will be surprised to know that Tagore himself was a homeopath practitioner, in the sense that he used to, give medicine, homeopathy medicine to people. And, he developed a unique medicine by blending 5 different leaves, which are very bitter, and then prepared a paste. And he requested all the members of the ashram to have that paste in the morning. And again, you'll be surprised to know, as a result of that, Tagore believed the ashram was less affected. So, the point I am making, that here the government was nowhere. Normally we tend to think that whenever there is a crisis, it is the government which should come and which should take the lead and redress the grievances of the people. I mean, and that's essentially kind of, British way of putting governance as an idea. But, these 2 examples which I gave from 1914 and 1918 suggests that even without the support, without the help of the government, the people in general, they took part and, participated in many programs, in various programs, to avoid, to stop, to contain the spread of the epidemic. So, the point which we are talking about now in the 21st century, that the governance simply means involvement of several, stakeholders, involvement of, for instance, NGO and non-governmental organization, involvement of, public in general, and to take care of certain responsibilities which under normal circumstances should have been taken by the government in general. I mean, I'm telling you from my own experience in Vishwabharati. Once the epidemic, this particular epidemic broke out, we, among ourselves in the university, started discussing that how to, help those who are affected by this COVID-19 epidemic. As you know, once the lockdown was imposed, most of the people lost their source of livelihood, so they didn't have really an income, to survive. And, this particular district, Birbhum district, in which Vishwabharati University is located, is really surrounded by many villages where you find only the local tribals, the Santals. And the Santals, they are involved in all kinds of menial jobs. And with the lockdown, they really lost those sources of their livelihood. As a result, most of them really starved to death. So under that circumstances, we decided what to do, because the university, which was founded by Tagore, and I don't know how many of you know that when the university came into being, Rabindranath Tagore, adopted 50 villages around this particular university. His idea was that I cannot take care of the country as a whole. I cannot, contribute to the well-being of the country, India as a whole, but I can certainly, contribute to the well-being of the villages, around this university. And on that basis, he, started giving these villagers, skills, because he said, if you give a poor money, the poor, will spend the money, and after some time they will become poor again. So instead of giving them money, he gave them skill. And if you come to Vishwabharati or Shantiniketan, you'll find that most of the villagers are self-dependent, because they are earning something or the other on the basis of the skill which they have inherited from their forefathers. So once the COVID-19 epidemic broke out and it affected this particular district as well, we sat together and we decided that we should stand by the villagers during this crisis. And what we did, we started collecting money. And you will be surprised to know, large number of people with, huge quantity of money volunteered, to support our venture, to support our endeavor. And, we started this kind of venture on the 10th of April, this April, and it has been going on. And every week, twice a week, we send relief material, rice, lentils, vegetables, salt, the basic items for survival, which we are, supplying to the villagers around. So, the point I'm making here, that when we think of governance, we should not depend on the government only. I mean, yes, the government has taken many steps. As you know, the Honorable Prime Minister has instituted what is called the PM Cares Fund, and most of us, those who earn a stable income, they have decided to contribute to PM Cares Fund, so that in this kind of epidemic can be taken care of. Agreed. I'm in favor of this. In fact, I argue strongly with my colleagues to donate one day salary, to this particular fund. But at the same time, I strongly believe that it is not possible for the government to take care of everything unless and until we, the people of this particular country, come forward and contribute to the well-being of the people, or stand by those who are suffering terribly. The purpose of governance will remain defeated. So I think the idea which is being now suggested is that the governance is something which is an act performed by, not by government only, but also several stakeholders, and that's something which is going on everywhere all over the world. So this is the point which I'm talking about with reference to history, that historically speaking, the idea of governance has evolved, and the idea of governance which remain confined to the government, to the institutions. I mean, the questions which Ravi raised at the outset of his speech, that what are the forces which changed this kind of understanding of governance? What are the requirements we now feel at this point of time? What are the institutional changes we need to undertake at this point of time? I think in response to these questions, I would argue that the particular situation is such that when the government appears to be inadequate, when the government appears to be not suitable, not properly equipped to handle this kind of situation. So since the government is not equipped, yet although the government has the willingness, I think we as citizens of this country have a responsibility to take care of the situation, and adopt steps so that people who are suffering with the outbreak of COVID-19 can feel that they are not alone. There are many people who are with them, and Bengal needs to be Bengal should receive special care. As you know, just 2 weeks ago, we suffered terribly because of this cyclone called Amphoon, and especially the South Bengal suffered terribly. So Bengal had attacks from both sides. We are suffering from COVID-19, which is the Indians in general are suffering, and also we are suffering on account of the outbreak of this cyclone. So at this point of time, I think the government doesn't seem to be well equipped to take care of these two attacks, two simultaneous attacks. And I strongly feel that when you think of governance, which is essentially an act, driven to an objective, and there we require the help of the people in general. As such, otherwise this kind of problem cannot be sorted out amicably, cannot be sorted out conveniently. Now this is the conceptual what is called package in which I would like to pursue the argument. Now the second thing, when it comes to India, I mean, Ravi refers to many schemes which our Honorable Prime Minister has undertaken. Yes, it's true that the Prime Minister has taken certain innovative designs which are quite what is called up to date insofar as Indian governance is concerned. But at the same time, I think we should not forget that India is a country which has a long historical legacy. When you think of India, we tend to accept, we tend to appreciate the British principle of enlightenment. Enlightenment which is based on care, concern, and empathy. Now, in Indian what is called mythology, or Indian, I think classical text, we have the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And to me, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and the principle of enlightenment, which came out in England, they are similar. So I think, when you bring this together, then we can think of governance in Indian context. Now, how do I justify this kind of contention? I'll justify this type of contention with reference to the Constitution. Because if you look at our Constitution, our Constitution epitomizes all these values. If you look at Part 3, which talks about fundamental rights, there you find it is very much a liberal constitution, in the sense that our rights are given to the individual, not to the group as a whole, except the right to religion, Article 25. But if you think in terms of rights to the people, or appreciation of people's endeavor, people's right, there you'll find Part 4, directive principles of the state policy. So I think Indian Constitution is one which combines the concern for the individual and the concern for the group as a whole. And then there are other parts of the Constitution which I think do not seem to be relevant here. Now I'm referring to the Constitution because when the government undertakes a particular decision, when the government becomes proactive, when the government devises a particular policy, the governance devises a particular policy with reference to the constitutional dictum, with the constitutional what is called sanctions. So I think the Indian Constitution to me is one of those fundamental pillars which informs in governance in so far as India is concerned. So Indian governance needs to be understood with reference to the constitutional obligations which we have at this point of time. Now the second point is that, as you know, that India is also a democratic country. Now when you think of democracy, I find democracy is not merely an institutional form. Democracy is a space where multiple ideas confront, where multiple ideas are respected, where multiple ideas are allowed to flourish and address each other in a very amicable way. So I think when you think of governance in the context of India, I fully understand this in terms of one, constitution, and two, the idea of democracy. So I think if you take these two into account, democracy and constitution, then you'll find Indian governance has a very particular shape. Now here again, I would like to draw attention to history. This particular idea does not seem to have come entirely from the West. If you look at the Constitution, if you look at the Indian democracy, the nature of Indian democracy, I find a lot of Gandhi here. Because if you look at Gandhian writings on the idea of panchayat, which essentially means collection of ideas, collection of views for a particular kind of administration, for a particular kind of governance. And you know that Gandhi introduced a very interesting concept, which we should now revive at this point of time, because when the governance is not merely confined to the government, but governance is about the involvement of the public also. Gandhi talked about what life being oceanic circle. This is a very interesting concept, the idea of life being oceanic circle. Gandhi explained that when you think of the ocean, in the ocean, there is no hierarchy of water. You can't say the water at various levels. Water has got in a very horizontal kind of existence. And then second, he argues that if you look at marine life, there you find the whale, which is huge kind of marine mammoth, and then you'll find also small fishes. They coexist. Now this is essentially a metaphor, and with this reference to this metaphor, Gandhi actually conveyed the idea of a society which is free from hierarchy, A, and secondly, which is also based on coexistence. Now this life being oceanic circle is something which I think our constitution highlights, which the idea of democracy which we are talking about has already led to. So the point which keeps coming back to me, that when you think of proactive governance and policy implementation in the time of COVID, to me this is essentially a recurrence of a situation which we faced earlier, except that the time phase has changed, and secondly we have got many new facilities, many new benefits, many new instruments, which we did not have at the past. Now, as I said, when the bubonic plague was bubonic plague became an epidemic in the context of India, we hardly knew what to do, because we became a very kind of directionless nation. But now at this point of time, at least we know that COVID-19 can be contained through lockdown. COVID-19 can be contained, by using mask. COVID-19 can be contained by using sanitizer. So I think, it is not actually a proactive governance. To me, I think it is reactive governance. With the prevalence of COVID-19, the government can be reactive, and along with the government, the public, the people, the citizens of the country, citizens of the world, has become terribly proactive to contain this kind of epidemic. So, I think within the time which I have been given, let me just summarize the basic point which I wanted to convey. There are three important points which I wanted to convey for the panelists to talk about, for the panelists to ponder over. The first thing, conceptually, the government cannot be proactive only. Conceptually, the government can be reactive also. That's why I said the government can be proactively reactive, government can be reactively proactive. I think if we take this kind of formulation, probably we'll be able to understand the functioning, the nature of functioning of the government. That's one point which I wanted to convey in my brief address. The second point, I argue that this is nothing new. This sort of epidemic which we are confronting now, which we are suffering now, which we are struggling to cope with, is nothing new. Because if you look at human history, we confronted this kind of epidemic occasionally, and I gave examples of 1940 bubonic plague and then 1918 Spanish flu. So this is the second point, that historically we have got evidence, and probably historically we can learn, we can draw on the events that took place in the past on the basis of evidence, on the basis of archival evidence which you have at our disposal. And I refer to the active role which Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore played at that point of time. And again, if we want to do a thorough research on that particular period, we can easily do it, because most of the reactions which Tagore had, they are all articulated in various essays, in various newspaper articles which he wrote at that point of time. And also, from that, I drew the conclusion that even at that point of time, the citizens of the country did not depend entirely on the government. On the contrary, they themselves took initiatives to take care of this kind of, what is a sudden outbreak of epidemic. So I think when you think of governance, we should think beyond government, because government is just one institution which take care of the crisis situation. But when you think of governance, it has got a very wider connotation, in the sense that it includes not merely the government, but also those who are involved, who are associated with the functioning of the government in multiple ways. This is the second point which I highlighted. And thirdly, I also argue that there is no what is called one size fits in all formula. We don't have one kind of formula which is applicable to all the countries suffering from this kind of epidemic. I mean, England may have one kind of device. Our friend from Japan, he may have devised one kind of formula, and in case of India, we have one kind of formula. But when you devise a formula, conceptually, we have to depend on the Constitution, because the Constitution guides. Constitution, provides a design in which we articulate our responses, in which we, shape our behavior, in which we shape our endeavor. So Constitution has to be taken into account. And secondly, the format of government, here I refer to democracy. And to me, democracy is not merely an institutional form of government. On the contrary, democracy is a device. democracy is also a space in which several ideas are allowed to jostle around, and on the basis of that, we can arrive at probably the most appropriate conclusion, which will be useful to take care or to contain the sort of epidemic, the sort of difficulty which we confront. Because to me, COVID-19 is certainly one of the most difficult events which the globe is confronting. But we keep on confronting. If you look at the death rate, casualty, human casualty, I think in India we lose more people on account of malaria and cholera than COVID-19. I mean, that's true, I think, probably other parts of the world. So, but at the same time, I'm not undermining the veracity, the ferociousness of this kind of viral attack. But at the same time, I would also urge upon all my colleagues who are participating in today's webinar to take into account the fact that COVID-19 is certainly a menace that needs to be taken into account seriously, that needs to be combated as forcefully as we can. But at the same time, we should not undermine that there are many diseases. I mean, I gave two examples from India, malaria and cholera, that frequent Indians and take many lives. So I think in case of India, COVID-19 certainly is one which has drawn our attention to a significant extent. But I think India requires potable water, for instance, to avoid cholera. India needs to have devices to liquidate, Anopheles and Culex mosquitoes. So I think, these are the issues which we should take into account. But at the same time, since COVID-19, is one which allows us to be together. That's why I say that COVID-19 is perhaps a very paradoxical kind of, has created a very paradoxical kind of situation. Because of COVID-19, now we are together, we are fighting together. All over the world, the entire, citizen of the world, they are fighting together. So we are together. But at the same time, now coming together is forbidden. So COVID-19 is one which is bringing people together and at the same time separating people together. Because touch is something which causes this kind of epidemic, which aggravates the situation. So I think, to me, COVID-19 is a very paradoxical kind of situation, in the sense that it brings people together emotionally, but at the same time physically, because of social distancing, it really separates people from one another. So I think, with these kind of ideas, I wish you all the best. And I wanted to be with you till the webinar is over, but because of my administrative commitment, I have to go and attend a meeting at 5 o'clock. So I thank all of you that you have listened to me carefully, patiently, and I don't know whether I have been able to convey any ideas which will be of any use to the webinar as a whole. But at the end, just I urge all of you to stay safe, to stay connected by being socially separate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Vidyut Chakravarti, sir, for sharing your vast knowledge and valuable thoughts on the topic, and also for connecting history and the past experiences and responses with the present for learnings and improvements in proactive governance. Also talking about historical evidences for learnings, and also on focusing on how proactive government initiatives are successfully implemented only when people are part of it, when the populace is part of it. Especially it was very illuminating when you connected the proactive governance principles with democratic principles, and also talked about constitutional obligations and ideas. I personally really liked the way you connected hierarchy and coexistence in talking about crises in history as well as in present time. And you're so absolutely right that there is no one solution, or there is no one model of proactive governance. Specifically in COVID-19 crisis, we have seen there are so many different and workable proactive governance models. Like, you know, you have the New Zealand, Australian model, you have the German model, and then we have the Singapore model, as well as Taiwan model. So all these models definitely, as you said, in the end, have you know are helping all the countries and the entire world to cope with this crisis together and learn from one another and each other. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time for us. I would have been really happy. We all, in fact, would have been happy if you have stayed with us throughout the session, but we can understand you have administrative obligations. Now, I would request our principal sir to say a few words, and then we can move on to the next session. Sir, please unmute yourself. Sir, please unmute yourself, Professor Kerr. Okay, I think there is some problem with him. Maybe if Sumanji is there, he can unmute him. Yes.
Namaskar, sir. It is always a pleasure to listen to you, sir. And rather today's inaugural address, you have set the tone for the many more deliberations to come. But as you said very aptly, sir, proactive governance directed at reactive governance, and reactively proactive also, that is also need of the hour. So other speakers are there. So we hope for this active deliberations will set some kind of generation of some ideas and publication of a volume, which will be really helpful in giving something for the future, sir. With this words, once again, sir, namaskar for coming to our conference.
Now we will
I seek your permission to leave the place, madam. Thank you very much, and
thank you,
best of
sir.
luck.
Thank you. I would now request our next speaker, Professor V.K. Kaul, to start the session. Sir, I welcome you again. I'm really hoping that we have a fruitful panel with all our three speakers. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kusha. Thank you, Ravi, for inviting me to this webinar. I have listened to Professor Chakrabarti also. He has raised number of issues related to conceptual issues of governance, then the history of epidemic. He has also discussed about every country has its own formula and model of governance to tackle these type of issues. So, but in my presentations, I have I have divided my presentation in my own way. I have raised questions. My presentation is in three parts. The first part, I am going to focus on the challenges and the problem that the COVID-19 has created before us in India and the world. Then second question is related to the next normal, because the different countries, they are taking different decisions and policies. So during this COVID-19, and they are also going to take decisions after COVID-19. So how all these decisions will result into a new normal. This is the second part. And the third part is how India is managing the pandemic and positioning itself in this new world. Is this a proactive governance, as you are discussing? And the title of the presentation, I think it's, I'm audible.
Sir, I would suggest that please remove your headphone. I think your voice would be clearer then.
Okay. Okay, fine. Now it's okay.
It's better.
I am not able to hear you then. Is it okay now? Is it okay?
It's better.
Without this?
Yes, sir. You please speak without it. I think it would be
Okay,
much clearer.
Without this, I'll read. I have divided my presentation in three parts. First, I'm going to discuss about the challenges and the problem that the COVID-19 has created before us. And the second is that the different countries, is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Then second part is focusing on the next normal, that what is going to happen as the different countries, they are taking a lot of decisions, different policy measures are being taken during this COVID-19 and then after this COVID-19 also. So what will be the result of that next normal? And the third one is that the India, how India is positioning, how India is managing. So in the first part, my focus is that the COVID-19, that there is a lot of discussion about COVID-19. Is it a nature generic virus, or it's a human generic virus? And the WHO is looking after this. They have formed a committee which was earlier stopped by China also. But it is well known that this virus has originated in Wuhan, China. And whether it is in the Wuhan's military biowarfare labs or in the wet market, this is yet to be identified. But it has caused a massive physical shock all over the world. We have seen that it has resulted into a economic loss, stoppage of economic activities all over the world, disruption of supply chains. It has caused a lot of deaths also. So all these things have resulted in a big physical shock. This shock is different from this financial shock that we have been witnessing all over these recent years in a globalized world. And we know that because of this shock, that the different countries, they are taking decisions in terms of lockdowns, and then after that lockdown also, there is now the normalcy is returning as the different countries, they are reopening their economies. But at the same time, you find that as the countries are reopening, and new problems are coming up. So we find even in India also that the problems of non-domicile workers has emerged in a big way. And then Professor Chakraborty also discussed about the recent cyclone in eastern part. There has been a cyclone in the western part of the country also. There has been a swarms of locust attack on the central and western India also. So there are a number of problems which are also coming along with these problems. So and one more thing, this is about the India, but at the same time we find this problem is also creating a lot of issues with the global politics. We find this globalization is being re-examined by different countries. Large number of countries, they are re-examining this. And the globalization, and within that also we find even the emergence of China in the form of a global manufacturing hub has created a worse form of globalization. The US-China trade war is continuing. Even the multilateral institutions, so they are also becoming ineffective. Even there is a lot of complaint about WHO. So these are all different local levels, national level, global level. All these type of new problems are coming up because of this COVID-19. And one more thing I would like to say that Professor Chakraborty said that there is a history of all these different physical shocks and the epidemics and pandemics also, and he talked about the plagues and other also. But you see that this particular shock, definitely it is a different from financial shock, but this shock is that in terms of the scales, in terms of scope, coverage, is completely different from the earlier shocks. It is the way we look at the global, all over the world, that the people are affected, the stoppage of economic activity. This has never happened earlier also. So in terms of scale, scope, coverage, this type of meeting this challenge. So it's very clear that this has thrown a problems of lives and livelihoods. And we find that when the lives earlier, when the government started meeting this challenge, they focused on lives. So in case of lives also, that the skills and capabilities which required for handling this type of issue was completely different. So the health infrastructure was very important. Staffing, health capacity, and all these things were important. In many countries, they were just gearing, using, and strengthening their health infrastructure. So this was the focus. And then related to that, one more issue was about essential items. There were vulnerable populations which required a continuous supply of essential items. So this was also an issue that we have seen, that how the different countries they have been looking at this, how they are creating and maintaining supply chains. They are distributing essential items to the vulnerable section of the peoples. And after that, we find when it was continuing, there was a lot of uncertainty about this pandemic, how long it will continue, and there was no vaccine. So there was an issue that we cannot continue to focus on this. We need to look at the livelihood also. So now we find again there is a shift where the different countries, they are focusing on livelihood. There is a reopening, and when reopening is again required a different types of skills, capabilities, and all these things. And we see that it requires a lot of coordination and cooperations of different levels, governance in the country, at the state level, at the central level, state level, district level, block level, even at the Gram Panchayat level. So that type of cooperation is required. So again, we find that as the situation are shifting, a new types of skills, capabilities are required. New types of governance is also is shifting its style of handling these issues. So this is all a first part, that what type of challenges and how these challenges are being managed by the different countries. The second part is about next normal. So for next normal, if you see that it is all linked with the way the different countries are taking decisions. So I would like to look at that first, that what was happening in the world over on the eve of this COVID-19. So we see on the eve of COVID-19, the global economy was in the slowdown motion. There was a backlash to the globalizations, and increasing tendency of nationalism was picking up. US-China trade and tech war was also going on. Even weaponization of economic policy is taking, where they are looking in terms of economic security, tech sovereignty, self-reliance are the issues where they are making it as a part of their policies. So this was all happening. And then when we see after COVID-19, the things are again, we find that all these things are going to accelerate. It is that slowdown is turning out to be a recessions, that all over the world are mounting. It's creating a lot of social economic problems. Increasing instability in the global politics is continuing. Credit rating agencies, they are declaring all these different countries, they are downgrading the status of different countries also. Even the unemployment is also going to make a big jump. Say a lot of unemployment we heard all over the world, even in India also, because of the non-domiciled workers, they are moving to their villages. So all these things. So, but specifically, I would like to raise some points which are very much clear, which shows that what shape it is going to take. So even Professor Chakrabarti also mentioned about the distance and all these things. So it's one thing is very clear. First point, that the distance, when we talked about globalizations previously, it was talked in terms of that it has reduced, it has changed the distance. But now we find even the distance is again coming into the picture. The is distance is back in terms of when we talk about social distancing and protecting ourselves with maintaining distance, and all these things goes against the values of the society and humanities, where we should work together, move together, perceive together, and all these things. So it's a big challenge also, that just a digitalization is not going to help in this way. So we need to focus more on this also, that how to not increase the gaps among the peoples. That gap should be filled. The second aspect is about the globalization. Globalization is changing. It's changing its form. Earlier also it had changed its forms, but now also it is going to change. But is it going to become a deglobalization? It's yet to be decided. It's yet to be seen. I don't think that it is going to be complete deglobalizations, because you see that in case of a countries, they are definitely thinking in terms of reshoring their essential supplies. There are some other countries, they are thinking in terms of diversifying their essential items, commodity, etc. And many countries and business enterprises, they are thinking in terms of localizing their productions and supply chains. But at the same time, when you look at this digitalization issue, digital economy is also accelerating. So and the data they are creating, the information they are generating, it's all globalized. So I think that something mixed will emerge. It is not going to be a completely deglobalized world as such. Third is about the multilateral institutions, that we find they are becoming ineffective, and we have seen in case of WHO how China has manipulated this WHO. Even in case of WTO also, it's not very effective in handling the conflict and all these things. This is also a problem. All these multilateral institutions need re-energizing, and it requires a lot of cooperation on the part of all the countries. Another thing is in terms of global politics, again, the way China is behaving. China, after this financial crisis in 2007, 2008, become very, very aggressive. The way it started intimidating its neighbors, in South China Sea, even drawing a 9-dot lines, and then massive investments in Belt Road Initiative, and it's created a debt trap diplomacy. It also started acquiring the strategic assets from different countries. All these things was happening, and in this COVID-19 also we find its irresponsible behavior in handling these issues is now exposing it more. So definitely the different countries, they are thinking in terms of that how to handle this. So it is going to change this world order. It is going to change the global politics also. This is also a new thing that is going to happen. And then in terms of business also, the business and the government, they were earlier thinking in terms of efficiency. But now we find it is not just efficiency, even the resilience is also very important. So simultaneously, efficiency and resilience is going to be the key words for business and the economies also. There is also one more thing that we see, that the contact-free world is emerging in terms of e-commerce, in telemedicine, even automation. So automation is on the rise. It's definitely automations, because of the technological changes which are going to take place, and because of this disruption that we have seen of the global supply chains, many of the businesses, they are thinking in terms of further digitalizations. But I think that we should also think in terms of some other alternative. Just digitalization is fine, but it should not be the only alternative. There is a need for thinkers all over the world to think that is there any other alternative to digitalization and technological advancement, which is going to create a lot of problems of jobs all over the world. One more thing that we find in new shape is in terms of government interventions. Government intervention is definitely going to increase in different spheres of human lives, and the business and economic activities. One more thing is about the business, that earlier also we were talking about that business people, business enterprises need to be to behave like a responsible citizen. So, but now with this type of problem that we have seen, definitely the society will again observe that how these business people are behaving. So they need to be more socially responsible. And last thing that we see, that this COVID-19 is definitely going to change the industrial structures, consumer behavior, market positions, and different sectors. Some sectors will emerge, some sectors will face a lot of problems. But exact next normal depends on the policy and the decisions, the different measures taken by the different countries. If the different countries, they are not going to take any decisions, they are just behaving like a reactive, as Professor Chakraborty was saying, a reactive type of governance. So in that case, this may lead to further less prosperity and slower growth and increased inequality and more unemployment and rigid borders. But if the right type of decisions are taken by different countries, it may result in a lot of prosperity, more innovations and productivity, more resilient industry will emerge, smarter government will be there, even emergence of human and reconnected world will be there. Exactly what is going to happen, that depends on the decisions taken by different countries, depending on their governance systems, depending on their resources and all these things. So now I'll come to the third point, that how India is managing. So this is a background that the decisions are important, the governance system is important, how you are using all this the decisions to meet the challenges. So in case of India, I just got 2 days back a one WhatsApp message in which there was a one question, that who do I want to be during COVID-19? So there is that the question is relevant for individual, it's relevant for business, it is relevant for government also. So they say that, are you in a fear zone, are you in a learning zone, or you are in a growth zone? So I find that definitely there are people, individual, business, and the government which are in a fear zone. So the people living in fear zone needs to be supported and looked after. They need emotional and material support. But when I look at the India, and I find that the way our government has managed this crisis, Ravi has spoken that earlier decisions taken by the government during last 4 or 5 years. I'm not going to go detail into that, but I'm just looking at that what is happening during this particular period. Even during this period also, a lot of measures has been taken, a lot of steps has been taken. The way the Prime Minister is communicating, all this shows that the government, India, is in a learning mode and learning zone and the growth zone. So that is what I find. So I'll just narrate that how all these things are happening. Say, look at that when this crisis started, our Prime Minister, he called for a public curfew. He made a call for supporting health workers, sanitation workers, security guards, and having a video conferencing with decision makers at state level, district level, and panchayat level. Then he was also having a industry leaders interaction with the industry leaders. All these things show that his style of functioning is very, very proactive. So he has been very proactively handling and meeting all these people to listen to them, at the problems they are facing and how the government is going to take care of them. He aroused the collective consciousness of the people to fight corona pandemic when he called for called for public curfew, and after that also. So all these things show that a very proactive type of a management governance system on the part of this. Even in terms of weather also, that immediately when this pandemic started, he announced a Garib Kalyan Yojana, it was a transferring a foods and cash and gas, etc., to the vulnerable section of the societies. Even looking at the supply chain issues, in case of some essential items like pharmaceuticals, even in the electronics, it was all a proactive. It's looking at the future that we should not be dependent on countries like China, where for all these essential items. So he announced a lot of incentives for investment and cluster-focused development of pharmaceutical and electronics. Even when all these things was evolving, there was a issues of non-domicile workers emerged, and the government realized that the problems. They asked these people, made a lot of arrangements that they should be adjusted in camps and they should be provided food, etc., so that they can take care of that. But we have seen that even despite all these things, the workers were not interested. They were interested to go back. So after some time, we find that they started arranging the railways and buses and all these things to help them. So all these things, so basically it's a learning. So they are learning also, they are reacting also, and they are taking a further step. RBI also declared a number of measures. Even on 24th April, I find that the Prime Minister spoke to the Panchayati Gram Sabha Panchayat Panch. Basically, it was on National Panchayat Raj Day. On this day, government of India, the Prime Minister, he inaugurated a e-Gram Swaraj portal, and PM Swamitwa Scheme 2020. These are all very, very important schemes. These schemes are having a lot of implications for the grassroots governance system. So it's going to strengthen the decision making at a grassroots level. There is a lot of things. I don't have a time to discuss all these things. And after that, we find in the mid-May also again the government of India declared a Atmanirbhar Bharat package. It was a 20 lakhs crore package in which a number of measures were initiated, announced by the government, focusing on poor people's vulnerable sections, for cash transfer, food, gas, and job under Manrega also. Then the MSMEs are also very, very, they have been hit very badly by this. So the liquidity to them, a collateral-free liquidity was announced for them. There is a fund that there are some SMEs would like to take up a new projects in a sunrise sectors also. So for that, fund was also declared. Similarly, the definition of SMEs was changed to allow them to grow further. There is a focus on clusters. There are around more than 3,000 cluster artisan-based clusters. So how to strengthen these? So number of measures were taken. Farmers and agriculture. It was realized that the rural economy and the farmers are very, very important. Agriculture sector is very important. So for that also the government initiated massive schemes. They announced measures for huge investment in rural infrastructures to strengthen rural supply chain network. And they also decided the farmers were facing a lot of problems to sell their produce, and so they modified the APMC Act. They also modified Essential Commodity Act. So now the farmers, they can sell their produce anywhere in the world to whomsoever they like. So a lot of reforms has been announced by government. All these reforms were pending. So now government took this initiative. You can say that it may be a reactive, proactive type of things. But I find that when you look at the past history of this government, the way they have been announcing different things, it is all very, very proactive. They are trying to solve the long pending problems in the political arena and economic areas also. Similarly, in case of industry, also government announced number of measures. It announced industry, open up the different sectors to the industry. All the sectors of the industries are now open to the private sectors. And the idea was that there is a huge entrepreneurial skill available in country like us. So we should use that skill to promote our industries and economy and all these things. So all these are very, very proactive actions. Though there is a lot of criticism that this package is not sufficient, it is a supply side package. It's less of a fiscal measure. It's not a demand. But I think that after that there has been a number of announcements by the finance ministers that this is not the end of all these measures. That as the economy will start moving, new problems will come up. We will again announce, and we are learning, we are opening up, we are taking steps to help our industry and the economy. On to 2nd June 2000, just on 2nd June again there was a this Prime Minister spoke to CII peoples, and he called for ask them to bring back growth. He said, announced that it's a very, very positive that you take a one step, I'll take 4 steps to support you. He asked these people also that you think in terms of identify different sectors, do a detailed study of the sectors, and then what you require, you tell me, I'll do that. So all these things basically show that this government has been very, very proactive. They are reimagining what is happening in the country, and at the same time they are taking decisions also. Now I'll just conclude because there is a indication that my time is over. So I'll basically now today is a environmental day also, and if you look at this physical shock that in terms of COVID, it's all linked with the nature also. That we have been destroying natures, we have not been consistent to the nature. So basically, we need, there is a great learning that this climate change risk is beating on our doorsteps. We need to alter our ways. So basically, nature-focused development is required. It should be the priority where we are looking at living and non-living creatures and entities and are sensitive to all these. It should be the people focus. The policies should be promoted where we strengthen the people, the individuals, we enhance their skills, capabilities, and give them a freedom to take a decisions. So all these things are required. So this will, if you will focus like this, it will be an inclusive, sustainable development model. So that is what we find that is required, is needed all over the world. Then second point is about the health infrastructure and digital infrastructure. The health it has become again a big priority. It has been realized that earlier we have been neglecting it, but now that we expect that this type of viruses will recur again. So there is a need that we should strengthen our health infrastructure. But at the same time, the way this digital infrastructure has helped, so there is a need to focus simultaneously on this part also. But there is a need to look at some alternative also. Then the rural economy and rural entrepreneurship is in case of India, I hope in case of other countries also, is also becoming very, very important, because the problem that we have faced in case of this non-domicile workers, they are going back and they may not come back also. It will create a lot of unemployment. They have skills and all these things. So we need to, this is a big opportunity by using all this workforce to strengthen this rural economy, strengthen rural entrepreneurship, provide them a skill, provide them a training, and support them with fundings, the money and all these things. So it will change the shape of Indian economy also when we strengthen this rural economy. And the next one is the cooperation and coordination is required all over at all the levels. It's a state, center, district, the Gram Panchayat level. It is also required among the state and central level also. It requires among the state and the business also. All this type of, it requires a state capacity to be strengthened. So definitely when the Prime Minister is talking about tech-driven systems, that will be very, very helpful in bringing the cooperation and coordinations and managing that. And there is an issue that we keep on hearing, the state versus market. I think it should be now emphasized. Both state is also important, market is also important. They have their own areas of working where they can do a good things. So I think we need to identify that instead of creating a problem that whether we should go for all out market or all out in state interventions, we should have a balance in state and market. And the one more thing is about self-reliance. Also in Indian context, the Swadeshi issue is there, and Swadeshi earlier also that the Swadeshi issue was there in 1905 when the Bengal was divided, and there was a lot of protests all over the country, and it was one movement was started against the Britishers. So we have seen that the self-reliance at that time, Swadeshi was there. Then even Mahatma Gandhi also started Suraj and Swadeshi. And then after 90s, when we started go for globalization, etc., again there was a movement against this globalization and self-reliance. But now I find that the self-reliance as a thinking philosophy is fine, that we should focus on local resources, local workforce, and local consumptions and all these things. But at the same time, in terms of working model, it requires some modification also. But definitely we require a lot of decentralization along with this. And in a country like India, where there is a lot of diversity in terms of states and all these things, even in terms of people behaviors, language, all, there is a need for a grassroots level decentralizations. Only that will bring a self-sufficiency, self-reliance India also. So here I find that there is a lot of resources. In terms of resources, there is the Prime Minister has also announced that every district should identify one product, one district. So that type of self-reliance, when you look at the local resources, local talent, local things, and then strengthen that, and then take these local things, be vocal for local, and they take this local, improve the quality and all this to a global level. So it's a different type of Swadeshi and self-reliance model. So I think there is a need to re-examine that. And thank you. With this, I'll just stop. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your informative and elucidating talk. I really like the way you have talked about how innovations can actually lead to solutions to the crises that we are facing, and how we need to strike a balance between civilization and nature. It is this pandemic has made us realize how tampering with nature and wildlife can actually create havoc for human life. And also how you've talked about inclusive development and sustainable development, strengthening our health infrastructure. Basically, you have talked about all aspects of governance and society that need to come together in order to overcome the crises that the crisis that we are facing right now, and also to have learnings for the future. Thank you so much, sir. We'll be taking questions in the end for all the speakers. So please keep writing your questions, query for any particular speaker that you have in the chat room. Now I would request our second panelist, our second speaker, Professor Kaisa Sorsa from Finland, to give her presentation. Over to you, Kaisa. I hope you're there. I'm not able to see you right now, but over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, good. Then I try to share my slides. Let's see. Can you see my presentation?
Not yet. Maybe you have to share your screen.
I already shared it. Wait a minute. No. Share. I share my screen.
Yeah, please do that.
I'm just clicking, and does it take time?
Yes, you've started sharing your screen. It's
Okay,
visible
good.
to us. Yes.
Okay, okay. And now?
Yeah, the presentation is there.
Okay, good. Well,
putting in the slide view.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to share my ideas. Here we have heard very interesting presentations already, and I try to give some points of view from my side. So now I try to. Okay. So thank you for presenting me. I just would like to also emphasize that nowadays I'm focusing in my research to two different projects. My first research interest nowadays is focused on the transition management of the Finnish textile industry to more sustainable one. And my role in the project is to investigate the role of proactive regulation for the transition management. Aalto University from Helsinki is leading the consortium, and the project is funded by the Academy of Finland. And the second project is just the topic of today. So the proactive governance and proactive regulation, and this project is funded by the Finnish section of the Nordic Federation of Public Administration. Before going to the details, I'd like to give a brief outline of my speech. It consists of the following parts. First, shortly, I'll present the aim of my presentation. After that, how I understand the key concepts or quite similar concepts to proactive governance and proactive regulation. After that, I will shortly suggest when proactive regulation is needed. Then I try to concretize what does proactive governance or lack of it mean in practice, and finally some short concluding ideas. No. In order to, in order to put my topic into context, I will give you two examples where proactive governance or proactive regulation are called for by governmental organizations, researchers, practitioners, or by entrepreneurs. The first example is COVID crisis, and we have heard very informative presentations with all earlier speakers. Some countries are managing the pandemic better than others, and I'm wondering what explains the differences between those countries that are managing pandemic well and those that are managing it not so well. According to the Gulf Today news, communities in Asia have succeeded in flattening the COVID curve by adopting a proactive and technology-driven approach and by learning from its past experiences. This was emphasized also by the earlier speakers. Learnings mentioned in the article are, for example, that you have to acknowledge the pandemic early and respond quickly. like in the case of Cholera. Then governments listened to their health experts and delegated implementation to local levels, while at the same time galvanizing the private sector to help develop innovative responses. That was also mentioned as a learning from one country. Then in the case of South Korea, government fostered public-private sector collaboration from social distancing to contact tracing. And again, the United Arab Emirates started scenario building, scenario planning, considering all socio-economic scenarios and learning the experience. We can read from the news also that India and especially some of its states have managed the pandemic very well from the very beginning, using cluster containment strategy, which means focusing on early detection of cases and via the creation of a contagion route map. Finland instead did not take the first signs of the crisis or learnings from other countries very seriously in the beginning. And we can read from the news that the fight against coronavirus in Finland hampered by lack of leadership. Well, nowadays we can say that the leadership has improved. The second example is about the proactive regulation and technological development. I'm not now showing this video because it will, I come confused with the computer, so you can look the short video later after my presentation. But the Nesta, the British Innovation Foundation, has prepared very many tools and methods in order to improve the public sector governance. And one such a tool or toolbox is proactive, or they call it anticipatory governance and anticipatory regulation. Anticipatory regulation provides a set of behaviors and tools that is intended to help regulators and government identify, build and test solutions to emerging challenges. They include sandboxes, experimental test beds, use of open data, interaction between regulators and innovators, and in some cases, active engagement of the public. 3 modes of action have been suggested: advisory, adaptive, and anticipatory. These 3 modes vary in their goal, approach, and who they involve, but all demonstrate a more proactive, engaged role for regulators in the innovation process. In this slide, you can see that those 6 principles which are behind the proactive or anticipatory regulation, and they are that regulation should be future-facing, proactive, iterative, outcomes-based, experimental, and inclusive and collaborative. And the second figure in this slide shows that how the government should how it should change the way it uses the regulation and what kind of regulation they use. It should be looked from the time perspective as well. There is short-term horizon and then long-term horizon, and the longer the horizon is, then it's more uncertainty when you are developing the regulations. Okay, now you should have a kind of background or context which I have in my mind when I go on with my presentation. The aim of my presentation is to propose that proactive governance and proactive anticipatory regulation could be worth taking a deeper look at, not only from risk and crisis management viewpoint, but also from opportunity management perspective as well, especially in the context of new technologies and technological innovations. Now, after presenting some background for proactive governance, I go on defining the key concepts. The word proactive, now it's not changing the slide. The word proactive implies acting in anticipation, taking control and self-initiation. And in the proactive law and regulation context, we can see two further aspects of proactivity. One being the promotive dimension, promoting what is desirable, encouraging good practices, and the other being the preventive dimension, preventing what is not desirable, keeping legal risks from materializing. Then the concept governance. But I would like to change the slide, but I'm not sure why it's not changing my presentation. Well, maybe I should just continue and try to show the slides when it starts working. But governance refers to making decisions and exercising authority to guide the behavior of individuals and organizations, which is achieved by the creation and enforcement of explicit rules with the power to reward or impose sanctions, less explicit social norms, guidelines, policies, or the creation of defined command structures. In practice, governance materializes as the coordination of institutions and agency in a given policy area towards collective objectives. Normally, it is experienced by the governed in the form of legislative or executive acts by the public authorities in line with their political context. This means that we should analyze governance from different life cycle point of view, design, implementation, and enforcement in order to see wholeness of governance as a phenomenon. However, in addition to public governance, governance activity also occurs daily across privately held organizations, like formal and informal civil society organizations, and social contexts, family and friends. In this case, we use the concept private governance. Well, governance has gone through transitions like other institutions during the last 50 years. Well, I have a figure in my slide for this, but unfortunately, you are not able to see the slide. Oh, can I move like this?
It started, Kaija.
Okay, good.
It started, yeah.
Okay. No, it stops now. Well, when we talk about, so governance has gone through transitions like other institutions. The figure in my slide, elements of new public governance in contrast with public administration and new public management, illustrates the changes in governance culture. New public governance as the organizational interaction among among public, private and non-governmental sectors constructions became the intense scientific discussion object already at the beginning of 21st century. The aim of new public governance structural part, more specifically public policy formation and implementation, is the search of more productive public policy. When we talk about proactive governance, does the new concept add anything new to the new public governance paradigm? I have tried to track the use of proactive governance from research papers, discussion papers, blog text, and all possible information sources. And I have found out that proactive governance concept was first applied in Punjab, and the core idea was to empower citizens through information communication technology to deter corruption and to improve public service delivery. Parallel to proactive governance, the notions agile, anticipatory and reflexive have some common ideas as proactive governance concept. For example, World Economic Forum defines agile governance as adaptive, human-centered, inclusive and sustainable policymaking, which acknowledges that policy development is no longer limited to governments, but rather in an increasingly multi-stakeholder effort. Then anticipatory governance denotes collaborative and participatory processes and systems for exploring, envisioning, direction setting, developing strategy and experimentation for a region. This concept is used by the United Nations Development Programme. Anticipatory governance allows a region, whether city or state, to harness the collective intelligence and wisdom of collaborating organizations and citizens to deal with strategic risks and leverage emerging opportunities for meeting development goals. It is an approach for social navigation, the ability of a society to navigate the complex terrain of social change. Can you hear my slides? Can you see my slides?
Yes, Kaisa, your slides are visible.
Okay, good. Okay. So this was the figure in which you can see how the governance paradigm has evolved during last decades. And then I explained to you that how different literature sources, how they are defining the different concepts. So the Punjab model, they emphasize empowering citizens to hold government officials accountable through proactive engagement. In World Economic Forum discussion paper, they also use the agile governance and adaptive, human-centered, inclusive and sustainable policy making. So these different concepts are used, and then I move on to the topics and try to answer that why we need, when we need proactive governance. From the literature, we find out that proactive governance is called for specifically for the fight against corruption, fight against crimes. Generally, we can see that specifically challenges that are systemic, then proactive governance could be good solutions. Also in the environment management literature, proactive governance was mentioned to be important in order to secure resources and other environmental benefits. When we want to emphasize the opportunity management aspect of proactive governance, use of it is most important in the context of fast-moving technology for the benefit of society. And for example, the United Nations Development Programme uses proactive governance to address and respond to help countries find faster, more durable solutions to achieve their sustainable development goals. And this organization has established 60 or more accelerator labs around the world. And other reasons why we should have this proactive governance, or it should be taken more seriously, is what you can see the reasons or driving forces in this slide. And in this slide, we can see that, okay, deepening strategic uncertainty, rising citizen expectations, accelerating decision cycles, and rising budgetary pressures, all these call for more proactive governance and proactive regulation to be used. Well, we can then ask what happens if we do not have proactive governance or proactive regulation in place. Well, this short example comes from Finland and from the Finnish healthcare system, which is really good system what we have compared to other nations. But what has happened during the COVID crisis is not so nice to read. First, I give you a short background how the healthcare system is regulated, and specifically the procurement which takes place on public sector. The public procurement procedures are governed by Act on Public Procurement and Concession Contracts, standard procurement processes of the organization. For example, in the case of COVID, the National Emergency Supply Agency has been on the news. Again, medical device regulation and product standards are very important sources of law. And compliance of these rules is very important. So in the case of regulation of this healthcare, the public regulation and private regulation are combined, and the CE marking, it's also very much used when products are traded to the single market in the European Economic Area. And this CE marking signifies that products sold in the EEA have been assessed to meet high safety, health and environmental protection requirements. If you look from the consumer point of view, when you buy a new phone or a toy or a TV within the EEA, you can find the CE mark on them. And CE marking also supports fair competition by holding all companies accountable to the same rules. Also, during the COVID crisis, some textile products specifically safety masks for the hospitals and for normal people, there have been lack of those masks in Finland in the beginning of the crisis. And this safety mask, the regulation behind them is the regulation for personal protective equipment regulation. And so the Finnish National Emergency Supply Agency should have followed all these regulation and implemented them in their daily practices. But unfortunately, all these good regulatory instruments, the compliance of them unfortunately was not complied, and there was the huge scandal related to face mask procurement. With this example, I want to say you that even though we have strict public and private regulations for healthcare equipment and textiles, etc., but if the implementation is not also on high level, then we should do something. So there is a big problem if the background and the implementation are not well managed. Okay. Then I go on to the just shortly to show you that what kind of tools some innovation foundations or researchers have developed for the proactive governance. Okay, we can see that there are efforts to work around existing governance structures, and then there are efforts to change the current policy-making system. So the efforts to work around existing governance structures are, for example, to highlight the use of technology, like the European Technology Platform for the Future of Textiles and Clothing, which collects and combines different actors on the sector, and they try to develop together solutions and better methods of governance for the sector. Then the use of technology in textile industry or as well in COVID crisis, traceability of materials and traceability of all equipments is made easier with the use of new technology. Then there are these other examples, policy labs, which I already mentioned, regulatory sandboxes. But then I would like to emphasize also that governance beyond the government, which the earlier speakers already mentioned, that we need all the actors to participate to the governance efforts. And here, from the regulatory point of view, I would like to emphasize the role of industry self-regulation, not only industry self-regulation, but also self-regulation of NGOs and other organizations. Then the role of ethical standards, specifically in the sustainability, when companies try to achieve the or raise their sustainable business practices, then the use of ethical standards is crucial. Then other instruments are creating collaborative governance ecosystems and again creating transparency and trust in technology innovation and all the activities the companies are doing. Okay, then I have with these examples, with these conceptual findings, I have tried to open how I understand the proactive governance and proactive regulation, and to say some conclusions. I would like to say that these concepts are quite recent notions, emphasizing the need to improve the governance systems in order to tackle wicked challenges and take advantage of fast-moving technological developments and networked knowledge structures. Proactivity is needed in each step of the governance cycle, in agenda setting, policy drafting, implementing, and monitoring. Case studies and examples should be gathered and lessons learned mapped in order to circulate good experiments to governments and also for the researchers. With these ideas, I would like to thank organizers, and I hope that some of my ideas are useful later, and thank you.
Thank you, Kaiser, for your interesting presentation, an elaborate one, which has actually given a comparative analysis of proactive or reactive governance in different country contexts, and how you've talked about regulatory mechanism in placing the regulatory mechanism in the right frame in order to deal with the challenges of governance. Thank you so much. It was a very, very interesting presentation. Now I would like to invite our last speaker of the panel, Professor Muneem Barai, who I think must have been waiting for a long time now. Professor Barai, I request you to take over, and over to you, sir.
Before that, may I allow to make a brief comment? Thank you, Kaisa, very much for joining us and giving your thoughts. And we have really, not only you have given us a guided path of proactive governance and policy making by, by quoting a lot of examples or a lot of action-oriented things happening all over the world. At the same time, we have had another professor from Japan. I know Professor Barai has been waiting since then, and his dinner is also getting late. So we may, you may excuse us for that, holding you for a long, long time. But nevertheless, the audience will enjoy your talks, sir. So they are here to, still there are more than 250 participants are waiting to hear you. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yeah, very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I believe that I'm waiting for my dinner, but I hope that you have done your evening kind of tea and other things. So I don't know how much I can boost you up at the moment. If you have taken your time to take your tea, then please listen to me. I'm trying to bring you to the more lively kind of discussion probably. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, the organizer, especially Professor Robi, my friend, and also other organizers. They're giving a lot of effort. At the same time, I must thank Professor Vidyut Chakraborty, who talked about Indian concept and other democratic views and other things. Though in many of the areas, I may not agree with him because I find that some of the issues are not very, I mean, I can differ, that is the point. And also Uh, Another point, what Professor Cole has talked about, I think some of the things are overlapping. Some of the issues I have picked up to talk could be a bit overlapping, but I'll definitely try to add some knowledge to that. I mean, extra kind of information. And also, Professor Kaiser, you have joined. So this is the first time I am seeing you. Hello from Japan. So thank you. Okay, so my entire discussion would be like this, that well, I have just this thing I like to share my discussion. I mean, the first one is, this is about me. My discussion is broadly on this issues, like some emerging issues in the post-COVID-19 world. So it's not entirely going with the proactive governance and policy implementations, I mean directly, but definitely some of the issues I'm going to talk about could be very much relevant for designing the governance issue as well as policy implementation issue in the future. So, the entire discussion has been divided in this way. I'll be talking a bit of introduction I'll be giving. So with that, I like to see or show the cost of the pandemic so far. I've divided the cost into three segments. One is the human cost, economic cost, social cost. And after that, we'll be dealing with issues that is the immediate concern, whether an economic recession or economic depression is going to happen or not. So most of the economists in the world, they're predicting there are doomsday as well, that what will happen. That is the case, is the short to immediate to a midterm kind of thing. But in the long term, and many of the issues will start from now, what will happen to global supply chain, where probably Professor Cole has talked about. What about the industrial policy in the post-COVID context? Are you going to say something different? Economic and political orientation of the world order. Many issues are coming up, and people are trying to say that, well, the economic and political order may not remain the same as we are seeing since 1945 or even 1991. In 1945, the Second World War stopped, and in 1991, Soviet Union broke up. So we find the world order in different dimensions, in different stages at different times. Now, increasing focus on China, that is another issue, in fact, because I believe that focus will further grow. Chinese activities have, in fact, gone in a way that more focus is there. Some of them might be favorable or positive, but I understand pressure more could be not in favor, as well as pressure might grow up in the world. And finally, some words as conclusion. So with this, let me say that, well, the first thing is about introduction and the cost. World is saying kind of incredible disruption in the way of life. It's incredible because Professor Vidya Chakraborty talked about 1918, the flu, swine flu, and before that other thing. But if you compare that one, it's not comparable. I think it's not comparable at all. In fact, we have seen something in 2008, 2007, and 2008, which is called financial crisis of the world. And it started from a single sector of a single country, and it affected the entire world. Single sector is the real estate, and country is America, and then you understand that how it spread all over the world, and we got affected. But again, the similarity here of COVID-19, it started in a single city, which is Wuhan, and then it spread from a single city of a single country. Then it has spread to the whole world. And today, the world meters. I mean, if you look at the statistics of Hopkins University, John Hopkins University rather, then we find that it has spread to 215 countries. Imagine the magnitude, how far it has gone. It's so huge. And if you look at the cost, human cost, yes, so far we understand that today the status is 7.72 million affected or infected, and 390,000 people died so far. 215 countries facing the problem. If we look at the economic cost, it's enormous. We find that, well, the estimate is about $5 trillion so far, and it's still counting. It will go up, I believe, because many of the countries are facing serious problems right at the moment. Though in some places the gravity has subsided, but it is going in the Indian subcontinent is increasing, and that could be the hotspot in the world at the moment. Now, if you look at the social cost, yes, we are not living in the world of 1950s or 60s. We are living in a world where many millions of people, they are living abroad. My country, Bangladesh, I'm from Bangladesh. I live in Japan. Many people of Bangladesh, they are living in Japan. In fact, more than 7.8 million Bangladeshis live abroad. More than 32 million people, Indian people, they live abroad. More than 27 million Chinese, they live abroad. So the cost, we think, that is not merely limited to particular country, community, it has spread to the whole world. So we find that the community concept, I mean, and again, if you look at the impact, we find that different communities are being affected differently. How? Look at US. Ratio, I should not go for racial profiling, but if you look at the statistics in the US, more than 110,000 people, about 110,000 people died so far. And if the statistics are like that 50% of the population are colored people, they're African origin. So sometimes I try to relate that, well, if you look at the outburst of this George Floyd kind of thing, the outburst of the people on the street, the way they're distracting and this distraction, the way they're behaving at the moment, some relationship might be there not only with social injustice, but something there on COVID also. COVID is making them desperate to behave in this way probably. So social cost is huge. But one segment or one particular area could be beneficiary in the whole thing, that is environment. I believe that environment is going to, there are a lot of studies, there will be a lot of studies in the future, probably I believe, and we'll see that environment has been benefited. Now the deeper issue, immediate kind of thing, the economic condition, what will happen is an economic depression near, or is it going to be a great, is it a recession or is it a bigger kind of depression? Yeah, that is a big concern because we find in the area, if you look at the area of trade, fine, there is huge decline. In the area of GDP, there is huge contraction. Employment all over the world decline, affected. Many factories are closed down, and many of them will never come out. They have gone forever. So trade, just look at the trade figure. In 2018, the total trade of goods and services all over the world was $25 trillion, which is equivalent to the total GDP of China, combined China, then Japan, India, UK, and Germany. All together is even smaller than 25 trillion. So it's a big amount. But what we find that almost in many areas, 40 to 50% rate has gone down. So it's a big issue. Then if you look at GDP contraction, even 25% minus contraction predicted, might be few of the economies in the world will have just 1% positive kind of thing, 2%, but most of them are going to contract. So another issue. And employment figure is not available for the whole world, but we find that in USA, it's more than 20 million people, they have left, they're without job and so on. And factories closed. So is it going to be a big kind of depression as it happened in 1929 to 33? I have I'm a bit optimistic. I'm not a doomsdayer because I find something different that makes me a bit optimistic that, well, it may not be a great depression. Recession, yes. Depression, probably no. Why so? If you look at the measures taken by different countries to address the problem, address how they're addressing the problem at the moment, we are finding something like this, that, well, US, if you look at US, the different financial fiscal impulses given different other deferrals, other kind of liquidity benefit, it has declared or announced 60% of GDP so far. I mean, to overcome the problem, 60% of GDP in all these areas. But also, if you look at Italy, 44%, France, 26%, UK like this, and so on. But if you look at the financial package itself, we find that USA, I mean, Japan is number one here. I find that 21.1% of its GDP has been more than $1 trillion. In fact, $1 trillion have been announced in the form of different financial stimulus package to boost up the economy, to give money to the people, every affected people. Similarly, USA has taken steps equivalent to, I mean, financial stimulus equivalent to 11% of its GDP, Australia, Canada, 10% of GDP, Germany, 4.9%, India, 3.5%, and China, 2.5%. What does it mean? To me, this means that in future, I mean, right at the moment, there are a lot of pent-up demands. In many countries, money is there with the people. So once the disease subsides, I believe that people will go to market, they'll start buying, and many of the countries will say kind of great revival. That is, I said, I'm an optimistic, I'm not a doomsdayer. So I believe that it can lead up to a level of recession, not depression. That is the thing. What will happen to the global supply chain? That's the biggest kind of debate at the moment. Supply chain. And you know, it started in 1979 or 78, in fact. China started opening up in 1978. And since then, China has become a phenomenon in the world. Economic phenomenon initially. Now it is also a military phenomenon, we find. What happened? After opening up, every country from the east, from the west, they went to China, invested their money, and for the assembly purpose, for manufacturing purpose, and everything. So billions of dollars went to China for creation of factories, whole setup of production, and we find that China has become the hub of global supply chain. It seems that the one way of supply chain, if you like to mention a single country which is having this kind of supply chain, we find it China. China, 40% of the global electronic products are produced and go through China. Then 80% of pharmaceuticals, medicines supplied to Europe from China. Similar kind of thing is happening to India. All the raw materials and other kind of thing. India is considered to be a pharma house, but if you look at the raw materials coming from China. Now, over a period of time, we find that, well, China has, right at the moment, about 1.6 trillion FDI stock, foreign direct investment stock. Just look at the amount, $1.6 trillion. But the COVID has shown something, that this kind of thing, just over dependence of a single country for the whole supply could be very, very problematic. And you see, China did many things, including when it was supposed to supply many of the things needed for addressing COVID, they stopped it. They stopped selling medicines, they stopped selling masks, they stopped selling PPE for the doctors and so on. So all of a sudden, the world has woken up that what to do. It's so dominant in the world. So this becomes, I mean, we find that this is in finance, there is a term which is called financial intermediation. We use the term financial intermediation. Means from deficit side to supply side of an economy, we find that everything, basically the finance, go through the channels of financial institutions. So they do a function which is called financial intermediation. What I find in Chinese case, it has in fact become the Chinese intermediation of global supply chain. It has become the single largest, most dominating, most prominent intermediary country of global supply chain. And the fallacy or the problem of globalization has emerged very seriously because of that factor. So how this will be addressed, that's a big question. Will it be like this? No. Probably many things will emerge after this pandemic issue. Many things is going to happen. We are going to find something. Some terminologies are like this, that we can find deglobalization, we can find reglobalization, we can also find a regionalization of supply chain. There are many things in the discussion, and that is going to happen. In fact, that is on the way. If you look at some of the steps taken by various countries, then this is going to happen. But well, we have seen Professor Paul and Professor they were talking about that automation kind of thing. Automation, I just give you one thing, which is Toyota's principle of automation. In fact, Toyota follows a principle of automation where human touch is needed. They said, well, 80 to 90% of the system, automation is fine. Again, 10 to 20% opportunity should be given to the human expertise. So this 80-20 or 90-10 or this kind of distribution should be there. Look at the George Floyd kind of thing, the destruction, the anger of the population. Don't you think that it has some relationship with the automation process of the world as well? Somehow, I believe my kind of apprehension is that something might be linked somewhere as well. It's not merely the inequalities, not merely the casualty of the COVID-19 kind of disease. Something else is there. People might be venting their kind of frustration of the automation process as well. So please take care of that fact that, well, human tasks should not be totally undone. If automation is there, then definitely if there is a process of if there is a scheme called universal salary kind of thing is implemented, otherwise human tasks should be there. We cannot just ignore it. So what about industrialization policy? Some of the overlap, this might overlap with our global supply chain kind of discussion. But I must say that, well, industrial policy is going to change. Many people may argue many things, but we believe that globalization in the present form would not continue. Then the debate comes, will the industrialization policy be following something called import substitution, which India is #1 country. They followed it since 1949 to 1991. So we are finding India followed this, many countries followed this, especially the socialist country, they followed this. I believe that, well, import substitution could be a policy, but not in true sense. It would be a diluted form. And there could be, my form is, to my mind, is selective globalization. Selective internalization could be the process. And in selectivity, we find that there will be an endeavor to achieve kind of self-dependence in kind of strategic products or services. So in the future, from now onward, globalization part, which we have seen so far, is definitely not going to exist. There will be a modification and also dilution of import substitution policy. Selective globalization and selective internalization could be the policy, and we are finding steps taken by India, steps taken by Japan, steps taken by US is in this direction. We are finding that one. In fact, Japan has also, you might have seen that Japan has announced $2.6 billion to relocate the industries which are located presently in China to Japan, or even to other Southeast Asian countries. India is in negotiation with 1,000 companies of the United States so that they can bring industries to India. And US, of course, is at a tug of war with China, and we're finding the steps are there. So what is the future? Selective industrialization, probably selective internalization to achieve strategic independence in the industrial policy. Now, the bigger question, what would be the future of economic and political political orientation of the world order? Another big question. Whatever we have seen, means we see the world order is changing. After 1945, US emerged. Then also we see the emergence of Soviet Union as a counterpower. Then all of a sudden in 1991, Soviet Union declined. Soviet Union dismembered, and we find something called a unipolar world from 1991 to 2008 onward. Even today, it's an unipolar world. Now, this unipolar world, if you look at the combination is democracy and capitalism. I mean, a liberal form of, they call it is the liberal form of global order, where democracy is there, capitalism is there. But this one is being threatened by another kind of ideology, where you find where a state will control the economy, but economy itself will remain in the private hand, and you will have little scope to go to the political space that will be restricted zone. So state-led, state-supported, state-controlled capitalism plus authoritarianism is the other thing we are finding that is emerging. Now, interesting point is COVID-19 has shown that this state-led countries, I mean, those state-controlled countries somehow, or regulated countries have done much better than the democratic countries. Look at USA, look at UK, the most glorified countries of democracies in the world. They're the number 1 and number 2 countries in terms of deaths and in terms of infection as well. I mean, UK is not number 2, but in terms of death is the number 2 country in the world. So they have, look at Italy, look at Spain, look at other countries, France, Germany. Well, probably Germany is good enough. I mean, they have tackled it successfully, but democracies, in fact, democratic countries to some extent have failed grossly, except a few examples like Australia and New Zealand. Many people talk about New Zealand, but I like to give little interest to it. It's a small country, only 3 million population or something like that. Might be wrong with the figure. And it's sparsely populated. So success story is not a story to me at the moment, by the way. So where the political orientation would be, this division is coming up. China will try to project itself as a model, which is alternative to the Western model, where economy would be in the private hand, but definitely be guided by the government, and politics would be out of most of the people. Authoritarian government should be there. So that kind of orientation, I don't know how far it will go, but there is a possibility of emergence of tussle between these two segments or two types of ideologies. More focus on China. Yes, China has been doing a lot of things. China is in focus of the world for quite a long time, but now COVID has given another kind of focus to China, where you find China, how China manipulated the figure, how China did not give the real position to the world, how China, in fact, even not informed World Health Organization about the human-to-human contamination, disease, how the disease can spread between human to human being. It was Thailand first. Thailand was the first country to inform WHO that human-to-human transmission is on. So take care, it's not China, though China is the country was infected first. So focus is on China, and we find that the focus is for supply chain region, focus is for the alternative kind of global running system, order system, focus is on. And we are finding some of the issues has emerged which are not very good. China is trying to deflate this kind of thing. And we find that even the Internal Security Act against Hong Kong is sort of deflection policy. They want to, and focus would be again going on China on that issue. Even I can explain that the recent border tension between India and China could be explained in this area as well. So it has kind of this thing. So with this, I think I believe that I have covered most of the things I wanted. Many of the things are still remaining, but definitely the conclusion should be like this, that in the past we have seen many problems, many kind of problems emerge, like Spanish flu, Second World War, First World War. They have disrupted the whole world. But in a peacetime, we have not seen this kind of disruption from any single sources anytime. And it has affected so much. The world, the humanity has been affected so much. And in the past, we have seen when humanity, in fact, is get affected or was affected in this way, the next time means after that, soon after that, there were changes. Changes were inevitable. I believe that COVID-19 also will bring changes to the world, and this is inevitable. I've dealt with some of the areas. There might be many, many other areas where you can find changes will come, and it is going to happen. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Muneem Barai, for sharing your valuable insights on the topic. I'm really thrilled that you have highlighted the geopolitical and economic aspects of COVID-19 and how you have talked about and related globalization and how you've actually talked about that globalization is crucial, has played a crucial role in creating challenges as well as facilitating recovery from this, or will be playing a role in facilitating recovery from this pandemic. Thank you once again, sir, for holding you for so long. It was actually worth the wait for all of us. It was a very nice discussion towards summing up the political and economic aspects of COVID-19 with specific focus on South Asia and with China being the big bully in South Asia or have been a big bully in South Asia for a long time. Now I would request our principal, sir, Professor Abhinarayankar, for his concluding remarks. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kusha. It was wonderful listening to Professor Muneem. It has been actually, it's a bliss for SLC family that we have been associated with, and all the time, whenever there is a need, we look, we immediately look back to you. And all the time there is something, and the way very, very analytically the whole, the changing scenario you presented before us. Actually, that is going to happen very soon. So before I could, deliberate on this, we have two distinguished professors who have been with us since beginning. So my request, Professor Kejo, because he has heard all of them, so he could also summarize, and with this he can also present his perspectives. Over to Professor Kejo Varis from Turku University of Applied Sciences, Finland. Kejo, can you hear me? Please join us. Yeah. Please unmute yourself. Suman, can you unmute Professor Kejo?
Okay, can you now hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you now? I'm very pleased that you and Kaisa Sorsa invited me to this webinar, and I take advantage to sell your book. So because Rabi Kar and Kusa Tiwari and
we don't have the copy yet. We didn't know that it was out.
Yes, but they have published an excellent book, and its name is Responsible Business Professionals: A Strategic Perspective of the Global Challenges. And please, everybody in India, please buy this book. This is excellent book. They have done excellent work, and I'm so happy that I was able to participate. My role was very, very minimal and very small in this book, but this is something which everybody in India needs. Rabikar is great professor, and your college is very great, and we in Finland are very happy that you have cooperated with Finland with this book. Thank you. That was all I wanted to say.
That's very, very sweet on your part, Professor Kejo, because we really didn't know that it was out as a hard copy. We had no knowledge about it. Thank you for showing it to us. It seems to have come out really well. So unmute yourself, sir. Sumanji, please unmute Principal, sir.
Thank you, Kejo, for that's a very nice gesture. And because of the lockdown, also we don't know when we can have the copy of this book. So at least you can show us our book from there. So it's a thank you very much. And secondly, we have with us, if I'm not wrong, Slajana is also with us from Macedonia. So Slajana, if you could hear me, can you please join and come out with your views? Slajana,
Yes, so although you are a part of IHMR family, still from the current IHMR family to you, I extend a thank you, a big thank you. Gift hampers will be on the way as soon as COVID allows. Yes, please do.
Suman, please.
Amazing team.
Professor Slajana.
For this webinar. So it's a huge clap to all of them. Thank you so much, sir, again. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, everybody, for listening and being with us here today. Thank you so much.
Can you please, all the participants, can you stay muted for a while? Yeah. So, Slajana, can you please hear me? Okay. I think right now she may not be available. Yeah. She's
yes.
not.
I think it might have got disconnected. So can you just offer your concluding remarks, please?
Yeah. So Ari is there? Ari? Is he there?
I don't think he's there. Maybe he was there in the beginning.
Okay. So no issues. So at the outset, I would once again, before formally we propose a vote of thanks. It was actually it has given us a lot of new insights into how the proactive governance system, though it sounds very familiar, but actually when you see it, the way it has been executed, whether at the grassroots level, at the local level, even at the government level, there are different structures or different processes. And all of the panelists, very, very distinguished panelists, they have presented different perspectives, starting from the historical times to the pandemic, historical pandemic times to the present times. They have connected it so well. Even connecting with our traditional systems, the way human beings have been operating, and the impact of Gandhian ways of Swaraj to the present focus on Atmanirbharta. All those things has given us a lot of new insights into the things. And when you talk of particularly this COVID times, also all of us have seen how everywhere it is, when you talk about democracy, it is about the people's movement. No doubt people have been at the local level, all of us are, all of us stand united in the fight against this COVID. And we have been organizing ourselves, and proactively we are reaching together, feeding people. Even at our college level also, we have adopted 5 villages. And whatever we can do best in our neighborhood, as Professor Vidyut Chakravarti was saying, that everybody, that is the duty of everyone. So whether you call it proactive, governance or management system, I don't know, but this is our basic duty of as fellow citizen of India. So that is how we have been, all of us are contributing. At the same time also, you have seen, never ever we have seen that suppose a patient is being, suppose somebody is infected with this COVID, then you see always the patient is not going to the hospital. It is the government machinery or the ambulance is coming to his doorstep to take them or move them to hospital. There is a sea change. These type of things were not visible earlier. Even people used to creep for getting an ambulance also. So how quickly things have changed, that is really, when actually we start introspecting or thinking that the way overnight things have changed, it's beyond the way police is also functioning, going beyond their duties. This is really, really unimaginable. So these are all, part of this proactive governance system, and things definitely, though our memories are very, very short, but I do hope that this thing should not stop, and we should go towards more proactive kind of, reaching out to people, reaching out to our stakeholders, like all of us are doing on this digital mode. So that is the only thing I can say, is that we should take it further, and we can come out with some, government is also very responsive, whether it is Man Ki Baat. What is Man Ki Baat? Basically, the Prime Minister is getting the feedback from the public. That is what he's sharing, and that is also he is getting feedback from the public, responses from the public, and taking it to for policy making. So this mechanism has galvanized further in the COVID times, and I hope this will continue further. And with these words, may I also request the panelists for a very quick comment or on this. Thank you. Professor Muni?
Yeah. Well, I think there is a question to me. Do you think the world should collectively think to now reduce its unending dependence on China? Well, it's by Debahuti, some Debahuti, yes, if you are there. To you, China has to behave responsibly. I think if you look at the way it's behaving since last few years, it's not behaving appropriately to be a responsible global leader. Even personally, I thought that, well, if there is a multipolar world or even bipolar world, then it's good for the world. But
Professor Munim, can you take off your headphone? I think so that the voice will be more clearer.
So it was not clear when I spoke earlier?
Right now it is coming better than earlier, yeah.
Okay, so is that okay?
Yeah.
Or is that okay? No? Is it okay?
Yes, it is coming, Professor Munim. It's completely fine. You can go ahead.
Okay, so the point is China should be responsible, and in recent times we find that it is it's not behaving properly with the neighbors. Everybody has a problem. I mean, when China is a neighbor, you must think about problems, except China, except of course Pakistan at the moment. And second thing is the nature again during COVID has not shown the due or proper leadership. So isolation, no, totally isolation is not possible. China is holding a very significant position in the world supply chain. It's not possible. China has to, first thing is no isolation, but other side, China has to behave responsibly. Otherwise, it will get isolated itself. People will go away from it. Okay, thank you, and thank you very much again for inviting me to the session. Thank you.
I would request to stay for a while. There are certain questions also. Professor Kaul, sir. Sir, please unmute yourself. Suman? Can you?
If there is any question.
Yes.
I would request my colleague, Dr. Kavita, who has actually throughout the conference has been collating the questions. It was a Herculean task because all our panelists can see there have been more than 200 comments in the chat room congratulatory messages, and from there she has collated the questions. I would request Dr. Kavita to please put some questions forth to our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kusha. I thank all the distinguished speakers for making us richer with their views and giving us different perspectives to think over. Now we'll quickly take up few questions due to paucity of time. The first question is for Professor Kaul. I would be taking. Sir, there is a question for you. How can we prepare ourselves to take advantages through turning our threats into opportunities in this COVID-19 period? Sir, are you? Yes, sir, you are there.
Yeah.
May I repeat, sir?
I know, I heard you. In fact, if you look at the Prime Minister, he is already saying all these things, that there are number of problems and challenges and how to convert that challenges into opportunities. And he outlined so many things that we have identified challenges, so we are to work. So basically, the measures he has suggested, we have seen there is a lot of problems with our rural economy. There is the problem of unemployment, and the way he has suggested improvement, he has reformed so many things. All these steps start to convert these challenges into opportunities. So it is across sectors. In case of agriculture also, in case of industry also. So everything is now open. So there is a thinking that India is full of entrepreneurial talent. So why not to use that talent to further develop our economy and strengthen our economy? So for that there were some hurdles. So that is what the Prime Minister has said, and the measures they have announced, that how to overcome those hurdles and remove that hurdles. So that's why I think that there is already a lot of discussion, and there is a lot of things that he has said. Only thing is that we have to implement all these things. And I think implement will also take, well, looking at the record of the Prime Minister, I think the implementation will take place and things will be better off in the years to come.
Thank you very much, sir. Can we have one more question for you? The question is, thank you, sir. What will be the effect of COVID pandemic on public health and environment? Sir, there were many questions relating to the health of students, school-going students in particular. But yes, in general, what will be the effect of COVID pandemic on public health and environment? Thank you, sir.
In fact, this COVID-19 is a problem for public health. And we find in case of India, the government was spending a very little amount of money on this public health. And it has definitely given a challenge, an opportunity to the government to think in a fresh and to increase its allocations. And you see that the government has been taking some steps, even Ayushman Bharat and all these things. All these steps are towards sending this healthcare system in India. We need to take this healthcare system to the community level. So basically, involvement of this Panchayati Raj block and all these things, we need to strengthen that. So it should not. So there is one thing that we have been saying, that one is a curative type of healthcare system and one is a preventive type of healthcare system. Our traditional healthcare system was preventive. Now you see, even in case of a COVID-19 also, we are saying if you have a good immunity system, you will be in a better position. So all these traditional systems were all for the preventive type of a measure. We need to, again, I think, refocus on these preventive systems and strengthen our systems. I think that the government is taking steps, and all other peoples at different levels, they also need to take it to that level. We should contribute the way we can do. In case of education, there is definitely, till we get a vaccine, the education is suffering. People are suggesting this digital media, virtual media. It can supplement the existing education system, but it cannot replace the the old traditional education system. I think the time will take. Things are moving in that direction. We need to take the technology also, but we cannot ignore the traditional system. I think the things will be settled on over a period of time. Things are moving in that direction, but some people are suggesting now the only way is a virtual type of a teaching and learning. That is not good for our country like us.
Yes, sir, definitely. Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable
Okay,
insight.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. So, Professor Kaisa, if you are hearing us, the question is there for you. Kaisa, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you,
Yes.
ma'am. So, the question for you, ma'am, how proactive governance differs in Finland from Norway?
Well, Nordic countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, we have different kind of history, and that makes small differences how our government has tried to solve, for example, this COVID situation. But well, it's long story, so I'm not going to use time now for this. I will answer to the Keijovaris later, and so shortly that our historical traditions make the differences. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So, Professor Munim has already answered the query relating to Indo-China relationship and the policy of towards China, basically. So, I thank all the distinguished speakers, our principal sir, and Professor Kejo also. Sir, you have been making really knowledgeable deliberations in the chat room since beginning. So, we thank you for that. So that's all for the question answer sessions. Thank you. Over to Kusha.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kavita. The fruitful and insightful discussion has sadly come to an end, and it is my privilege to offer the vote of thanks for this conference. Firstly, I would like to thank all our esteemed guests and speakers. I begin by thanking our inaugural speaker, Professor Vidyut Chakravarti, who is right now not there with us here, for sharing his valuable thoughts on the topic. Professor Chakravarti did full justice to the topic and his position as the inaugural speaker in the conference. He connected history, epidemics, and governance, and contextualized it in the Indian context. And talked about how we can learn from the past epidemics and pandemics. Secondly, I would like to thank all our esteemed panelists for a very informative and comprehensive session. I'll begin by thanking Professor V.K. Kaul, who talked about conflicts in South Asia and summarized different economic, political, social, cultural, environmental aspects that will help us in overcoming these crises. And he also connected and he also talked about the bond between, or the balance between, civilization and nature. I would also like to thank Professor Kaisa Sorsa from Finland, who through her elaborate presentation gave a very, very interesting comparative study of responses to COVID-19 from different countries, and also talked about models, models of governance, ideal models of governance that have been practiced in the past and now are being practiced, and there are ways in which we can learn from them. I would also like to thank Professor Munim Barai, who has joined us from Japan. And I'm really thankful to you, sir, for contextualizing the entire topic from an economic point of view and contextualizing it in the South Asian context. Because the problem where it began from, the country as it exists in South Asia, China specifically, it was really wonderful how you have actually nailed it. You've without mincing any words, you have highlighted the challenges that have been created by this epidemic and how we need
Madam,
to overcome
sorry for
them by.
interrupting you. Kusha Madam, Slajina has joined. Actually, there was a technical issue, so she was not unmuted. So that is why she couldn't. So please ask her to just a very close, brief remark. Slajina is there from Macedon
Yes.
side.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, Professor Barai, it was really illuminating your talk. Before I continue with thanking the entire organizing committee and the people involved in making this conference successful, I would like to invite Sladzina, who has been a very important partner with Shamlal College and actually recently visited here in India when we had the international conference in January. Sladzina, please, if you switch on your video if you're there. I'm not able to see you at the moment. Yes.
Kusha, I spoke with my friend in the mobile phone because I got very bad news for Macedonian situation with COVID-19 because every day grow number from new patient from COVID-19. For today, 120, and I please you ask me something, but I don't hear you. You hear me?
Yes, Sladzina, you're audible. Are you there with us?
Yes, but you asked me something about including conference.
Yes, did you were you there in the sessions of the conference? What is your takeaway?
About conference?
Yes.
Very nice conference. Very interesting theme. Very eloquent speaker for this conference. For me, very new information, and I can do compare with information with Macedonian, and I'm very proud with you, with Rabi, with my colleague from Sharman University, because you organize very nice, interesting conference, inspirative for me, for other participants.
So that's all. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Sladzina, for being with us. It was very nice to have you with us. Though we did lose you for some time in between the conference, but it was nice that you could join back. Just to continue with my vote of thanks, I would, in the end, I would like to thank our principal sir, Professor Ravi Narayankar, who has been a constant guiding force for us and has mentored students, teachers and staff of SLC in reaching their potential. I would also like to thank the participants of this conference who have actively participated in this endeavor and have fulfilled its purpose. We are overwhelmed by your messages, congratulatory notes in the chat room. They are full of them. Thank you so much for your encouraging words. I would also like to thank the entire team of IQAC for their cooperation and contribution to the successful organization of this conference. I would also like to thank our administrative officer, Mr. Jagat Singh Chauhan ji and his team, especially Mr. Suman Jha, who has been there in the college office managing this conference from there. Lastly, I would like to thank, and most importantly, actually, I would like to thank our students, especially Anshaj and Anshuman, for their constant support, immense hard work and sincerity in all the works related to the conference. They are third-year students, and despite all the uncertainty that surrounds their future at the moment, they've always been there and they've always been there with us, participating and managing the events that IQAC has been organizing. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Have a safe day and safe life ahead. And I hope the feedback link has already been shared with you. Please do give your feedback to us because on the basis of the details that you fill in the feedback form, we'll be issuing e-certificates to all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Kaul. Thank you, Professor Muneem Barai. Thank you, Kaiza. Thank you, Kejo. And it was really wonderful to see the book that you showed to us. That was really a great moment for us. Thank you all the participants, Kavita and Ashu.
Thank you.
Sir, yes.
Thank you from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ravi, Kusha. Thank you, Kavita. Thank you.
Yeah.
Professor Kaul, we never talked, but thank you very much. In fact, we should have talked earlier. Unmute yourself. Unmute. Professor Kaul, unmute yourself, please.
Sumanji, please unmute Professor Kaul.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's nice to see you, Professor Barai.
Thank you very much. It was, in fact, your contribution to my book, earlier book, and I have recently got published another book on Bangladesh. Is getting very good response from Palgrave Macmillan. Palgrave Macmillan, Singapore. It's on Bangladesh.
Okay, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It's getting very good response. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Ravi.
Ravi, thank you. Kavita, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, namaste from Macedonia. Namaste, Professor. Namaste.
Macedonian
Yes.
Need very help from Macedonian people, because Macedonian people is no respect role for COVID-19 in the situation is very bad.
Okay.
Every day.
Don't worry, you know yoga and you have been doing it.
Yes.
And yoga, so that will keep you safe. Stay safe.
Yoga and meditation I am fine, but other people.
So that has kept you healthy. So stay fit and healthy. God bless.
Yes.
Thank
you.
Thank
Ravi,
you very much. Namaste for all.
Namaskar to all of you.
Ravi, thank you for inviting me. I hope I tried my best to present something. Thank you, Ravi, and bye. I'm leaving.
Okay.
I'm also leaving.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Kaiser.
Bye.